Welcome to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where real life meets big dreams. I'm Johanna, your host, and every episode will dive into inspiring stories from PAs, doctors, and professionals who are also dreamers and mission-driven changemakers. From the hospital halls to the hearts of our homes, and even into communities across the world, we'll laugh, learn, and uncover the challenges, triumphs, and everything in between as we see life through each other's perspectives. Looking for more joy and balance in your career? Don't miss our free guide, How to Be a Fulfilled Provider. Your quick boost of encouragement with tips to help you thrive while juggling all your hats you wear. And if you've got little dreamers at home, check out Little Evie's Big Dreams on Amazon. These stories are meant to spark imagination, courage, and kindness, perfect for bedtime or anytime. Follow along as Evie, a little Sri Lankan girl, brings joy and creativity to her community while daring to dream big. This podcast is also brought to you with love by the Ephraim Foundation International, because empowering children and families in rural Sri Lanka isn't just charity, it's continuing a legacy of hope and creating futures full of possibilities. So grab your cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and get ready for uplifting conversations that will leave you inspired and equipped to make a greater impact. Let's jump in.
I feel like your calling is doing that thing that only you can do, because not only has God designed you uniquely, your inside, you've also had a very whoever you are, you've had a particular unique experience that nobody else in the world has had. If we can be asking God about that to find our call, the unique way, God, that you designed me, and this unique set of experiences I have, some of them are good, some of them were hard, but all of those I feel like are what God uses to invite us into our particular callings.
Welcome back to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where we explore the intersection of purpose, faith, leadership, and the many roles women carry. Have you ever felt a story stirring inside of you? Maybe you've wondered if your experience, lessons, or expertise could one day become a book. Or perhaps you felt called to share a message but aren't sure where to start. Today's guest is someone who has helped countless people bring their stories to life. Margot Starbuck is a New York Times bestseller writer who has written dozens of books and partnered on hundreds of major publishing projects as a writer, editor, and coach. Some of her books are Small Things with Great Love, Adventures in Loving Your Neighbor, The Grown Woman's Guide to Online Dating, Lessons Learned While Swiping Right, Snapping Selfies and Analyzing Emojis, Unsqueezed, Springing Free from Skinny Jeans, Nose Jobs, Highlights, and Stilettos, and Not Who I Imagined, Surprised by a Loving God, or The Girl in the Orange Dress, Searching for a Father Who Does Not Fail. A graduate of Westmont College and Princeton Theological Seminary, Margot specializes in helping aspiring authors craft compelling book proposals, clarify their message, and navigate the path to publication. In this conversation, we discuss storytelling, calling, creativity, overcoming self-doubt, identity, navigating rejection, and what it really takes to transform an idea into a published book. We also explore how faith shapes our work and why your story matters, and how women can pursue God-given dreams in every season of life. Whether you've always dreamed of writing a book or simply looking for encouragement to steward your gifts, well, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Margot, for joining me today. It's such an honor, and I'm so happy to have this conversation with you.
I've been looking forward to it. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love how creative you are, and just right off the bat, you start with your name rhymes with go-go, which already feels memorable and creative. What's your story behind your journey into writing and publishing?
Well, first of all, I got to give credit to nieces and nephews who call me Go-Go because they couldn't say Margot, but it is also the Zulu word for grandmother. I am not a grandmother yet, but when I get there, it's going to be my grandmother name. But I do want you to hear my journey, because when my babies were ages about 4, 5, and 6, I'm in Durham, North Carolina. A friend invited me
Uh-huh.
to attend a writing conference in Michigan. And in that moment, I did not read, I did not write. And I'm like, yeah, I need a break. Let's go there. And
Uh-huh.
when I was at this writing conference, everything in me came alive. And I remembered "Ooh, that book I was going to write after grad school and that book I was going to write in 3rd grade. And then I saw myself as a 6-year-old. When I was in 1st grade, I'd experienced an injustice that morning. I was steaming about it on the way to school, marching up the stairs. What I said to myself is,
Mhm.
nobody listens to 6-year-olds, but if I grow up and write a book, they are going to have to listen to me. And the book was Adults Think That Little Kids Can't Walk Big Dogs, but they totally can. So do not steal it.
Yeah.
Anybody who's listening, do not steal it. I haven't found a publisher yet. But let's say, so that's when my babies were little. And what I heard at that
Uh-huh.
writing conference is if you want to publish a book, you have to build your platform. So that fall, my little one, the youngest, marched off to preschool. I started writing some
Mhm.
articles. And the following year, I was able to meet my literary agent. And my first book was that memoir, The Girl in the Orange Dress. And as far as my journey, first 5 years, I wrote 5 books. I don't even know if I recommend that
Oh,
because you got to leave space to
oh
promote
my
your book as
goodness.
well. And after that, I started doing editing, ghostwriting, coaching authors. And, I
Mhm.
didn't see the way that it would unfold, but I'm so grateful for what I get to do every day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how just like one opportune moment that is so random, a
Mm.
friend inviting you to a conference can totally change the direction of your life, literally.
Yes, yes, it's true. That's right. We think we can see how it's going to unfold, but a lot of times we cannot. I don't know, but I don't think I
Yeah.
know anybody who what they imagined when they were 10 or 15 or
Mhm.
20 is exactly how it unfolded. It doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah. 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 It's
Yeah.
a journey, and those moments, of just opportunity just really make the difference in where we go. And so God provides those little moments just when we need it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yes.
so what still excites you about storytelling? You've written so many books, worked on several hundreds of projects. What still excites you about the storytelling aspect?
Yeah, I think it's because it's how our brains are wired and it's what
Mhm.
we're made for. So sometimes as
Mhm.
writers, we can get excited about this nerdy idea or concept. And when I see that in manuscripts where I'm
Mhm.
coaching authors or I'm editing, I'm like, start with a story, grab us with a story. It's how we're wired. And even when we think
Mhm.
of some of I'll call them the classics, Wizard of Oz and Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, right? There's
Mhm.
this recognizable story arc that our hearts are kind of hungry for, that we're drawn to
Mhm.
it. And of course, that's going to express itself in so many different ways, in so many different books. But I really think that we are wired for story. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to because you tell stories from your own lived experience, right? And talking about, even your first book, you mentioned The Girl in the Orange Dress, talking about identity, belonging, and your own experience with adoption, just to talk about this storytelling aspect from a lived experience. How, and, going back to like maybe speaking to what women may feel and struggle with too, with those words of identity, belonging, why do so many women struggle with feeling chosen, worthy, or enough? And how did you end up trying to incorporate that into your storytelling? And why did you, even start with that?
Yeah. And the quickest glimpse for listeners
Hmm.
is just that I was
Yeah.
adopted as an infant into a home with alcoholism, violence, divorces, and everybody navigates loss differently. I did it with a great big smile. And as a young adult, I had built this shiny, happy shell around my heart. And when my roommate, who is single, gave birth to a little baby. It was sort of this crack in that shell around my heart, and it opened up some of the hurt and pain and loss and loneliness that was inside. And I think I started this journey once we took the smile off. And in my early 30s, I was wrestling with it and sort of where was God in those hurt and broken places and really crying out. And the words that I heard, I wish you could see them. These words are on the wall of my home. They're on the wall of my house. They're on my t-shirts. The 4 words are, I am for you. And I think that as women, as humans, we all have this variety of experiences that does include brokenness and questions about our identity. And I just think that all these deep questions we're asking, the answer is, I am for you. And then God spoke a little more through people, and I heard, I am the one who is with you and for you. So no matter what our story has been, we have that confidence. And this is fascinating. A friend went to Regent in Vancouver, I think seminary there. The way that her professor had them translate Yahweh, the Hebrew name of God, was when they got to that word in the text in our English Bibles, it's capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. They would translate it as, I am the one who is with you and for you, right? So we can sort of hear echoes of that I am that God spoke to Moses, but like it's literally who God is, the name of God. I am the one who is with you and for you. So anybody listening, our stories are necessarily very different. And yet I really do think that that is the quiet whisper that God is speaking to every heart. I am for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love that. And, because you're talking about God saying, I'm for you, and the brokenness that we all feel in different forms, different experiences. And what have you learned about resilience and human courage, just not only through your own story, but working with those that are, other athletes, entertainers, and overcomers that you've written with, that you've worked with on this personal level of storytelling?
Mm, yeah. When I mentioned that story arc called The Hero's Journey,
Mhm.
that really resonates with our hearts. The general gist of it is, and if I'm working with a writer and we're figuring out how to tell their story, maybe the writer was born with certain challenges or obstacles that they had to overcome. Or maybe they started the journey and then they got stuck and they had to overcome these obstacles
Mhm.
in that, that kind of universal story that we're hungry for. It's
Mhm.
we're on this journey and we run into obstacles, troubles along the way. And then maybe there's a mentor or a guide who helps us on our journey, maybe helps us take the next step. And then we are engaged in this challenge and we find ways to succeed. And as I
Mhm.
think about some of the athletes, entertainers, when I say overcomers, it might be a person with a disability. It might be a person with a physical disability, intellectual disability. I guess that's the joy of what I get to do is to see in their unique story, what did they do to overcome the
Mhm.
obstacle? And, ooh, yeah, it convinces me that as human beings, we can be so very resilient. And it's not going to look the
Mhm.
same in my story as it is in your story or in anybody else's story. But just, I see a lot of, yeah, like creativity in the ways that people find to be resilient in their
Mhm.
particular story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that every story is unique, even if, and because the challenges are different, the circumstances are different, even though we may learn similar lessons on those stories and journeys. And so that's why I guess, sometimes we hear oh, there's so many stories out there that's like that. But each of us has a unique voice to tell a unique perspective for that lesson learned.
Ooh, I gotta jump in and say, I am
Yeah.
so convinced, whether you are a
Mhm,
writer, not a writer, whoever you are, there's
mhm,
something that only you can say in the way that
mhm.
only you can say it. And so as I'm coaching writers,
Right,
that's kind of what I'm pushing them to do. So let's say you want to write a
right.
book on identity, sure, there's
Mhm,
lots of books like that. Don't say what all those other books have said. Say the thing that only you can say in the way that only you can say it. That's what I would want particularly writers to hear. Mhm.
right. Yeah, and, you know, going back to, women wrestling with identity outside of achievement and titles, how has your faith grounded you in your identity through different seasons?
Mm. Yeah, and I would say that really does go back to that for me, that
Mhm,
deep, deep core message of God being for me, for
mhm,
you. So in any moment, like whether I've reached the goal, achieved the thing, whether I failed, whether it didn't turn out like I thought it did, and maybe especially that I had been married 8 years when my husband came out as gay. And that's just one of those things, right? We didn't see that
mhm,
coming. But even in the
mhm.
hardest moments, again, that constant whisper that God is for us. And boy, at the end, when we all get to the end of our lives, I don't think anyone's going to be keeping track of the achievements, the accomplishments. But I think that we will be able to like look back on our lives and really have a lot of peace and confidence in those seasons where we were able to hold on to that real sure awareness that no matter what's happening out here, that God is with us and for us.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're always trying to earn that significance when we're really trying to search for that belonging. And that when we find that belonging in knowing who is for us, which is God, who loves and deeply knows us, then that gives us the peace we are searching for in the titles, but we need in that belonging to Him.
Mhm, mm,
Yeah.
true.
And so also, I mean, you talked about some heavy, difficult topics in your books, but, and I'm sorry you had to go through all of those things. But I know that that has led you to, different lessons that you've learned through resilience and courage in
Mhm,
finding your belonging. And I love that you have stayed true to that. I am for you, how God is for you, no matter what. And what does that mean for you to live creatively while remaining rooted spiritually?
mm. Um when I don't know if you can, like, look around here at me or my car covered with daisies to know that,
Mhm.
like, creativity is definitely who I am. I got a little skin on here, but it's a lot of creativity. So when I wake up, like,
Yeah.
a lot of my days in whatever whether it's painting or writing or
Mhm.
whatever it's gonna be, a lot of my life is spent sort of doing creative things, and I feel like the
Yeah.
win, especially for creatives, is going to be letting God direct the thing, even just like, yeah, our next step, because my journey was I was making and selling beads and cards and puppets and magnets and all the things. When I landed on writing, I know that nobody in my life believes me. They're like, oh, okay, Margot, now you're a writer. We'll see what you're going to do next week. But I really do think that that was led by God. And especially for those of us who maybe have a lot of things we want to do, let's say work and motherhood and leadership and all the things, that sometimes we can feel like we're not keeping up, we're not doing all the things, we're failing at this, and we want to do this thing
Mhm.
better. But I feel like if we can stay rooted and grounded, God's not
Mhm.
asking all those things of us, right? That's us, that's coming from in here.
Yeah.
I think that God's invitation to us is, whether it is at home,
Mhm.
it's at work, in our community, is just to do the next thing. And that's not overwhelming. Like,
Mhm.
that's doable. And so I feel like
Mhm.
that's where we can walk it out, live it out step by step, and kind of quiet all these voices inside us and just
Mhm.
ask God, okay, what's my next thing? What's my next thing? I think that's the win. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. creativity is inherent in each of us because God is so creative. He created so much that I feel we are a reflection of that creativity. But yet sometimes we may try too hard and then we have
We get
to
ahead of
stay
God.
rooted in, yeah, in rooted in what his purpose in that creativity for us.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a fine line. That's hard to balance, but that's an important point that you actually pointed out. And
Mm.
so, yeah. And so, I mean, you attended Princeton Theological Seminary and, what made you decide to do that all of a sudden too? And how did that shape the way you approach writing too?
Ooh. Boy, I think I knew I had some experiences in college. I think I knew that I
Uh-huh,
wanted to go into ministry. And because I'm a
uh-huh.
good Presbyterian and before me, my brother was a good Presbyterian, and he went to seminary specifically for both pastoral ministry and teaching at a university, I would be
Okay.
happy just sort of hanging out with like women at a dumpster. Like I don't think I needed Greek and Hebrew for that, but again, because I'm Presbyterian, went to seminary, and even though
Yeah.
again, at that time, I couldn't see because I didn't imagine serving a congregation, I didn't see how it would unfold. My first job was
Uh-huh,
as a chaplain to folks with intellectual and physical disabilities, and then I did
uh-huh,
end up serving a congregation, but I am still so grateful to have the benefit of that education because today I get to do
uh-huh,
theological edits on books and all sorts of good
uh,
things. And again, right, sometimes a thing is happening here and we can't
right.
exactly see how it's going to unfold in the next season. And that was definitely
Yeah.
true, true, true for me. And then when I think, we're kind of talking about people's unique stories and everything. And when I
Uh-huh,
think about that theologically, a
uh-huh,
few weeks ago, I worshiped, it wasn't my church, but in Durham, Durham's historic Union Baptist Church. And it was the church's anniversary. I want to say like 129 years of this church. And somebody who I'll just say, I think he was a senior citizen, but he grew up in that church. And he told us that back in the day, the church's motto was everybody is somebody. And boy, that really
mhm.
landed with me, right? Because
Yeah.
whether or not you're going to keep track of your story or write it down, every
Mhm,
single human has this unique story, unique potential, unique gifts. And I
uh-huh.
really love that. Can you imagine if we moved through
Yeah.
our days and every human we saw, we didn't recognize them as a nobody or somebody who's not for us, but everybody is a
Mhm.
somebody. And I got to ask you,
Yeah.
because I know that you work with little kids overseas who some people might see them and be
Mhm.
like, they're a nobody. They're not a somebody. I want to hear you say something about everybody being a somebody. How do you see that in the
Oh,
you do?
yeah, and so I think the first story that pops into my mind actually was from this morning. I was working in my, I was rounding up the long-term care facilities that I work at as well. And this one patient of mine, she has this beaming smile, bedbound, not able to do much, but every time I see her and her eyesight's deteriorating, but every time I see her, I say hello and she recognizes me by my voice.
Mm,
And today she came in and she said, Johanna, it's so nice to see you. I have been praying for you. And I was so touched by that because
mm,
this little lady is physically in distress, and difficulties, but she has taken the time and thought upon herself to pray for me. And I'm so grateful for that because the prayers sustain us, that's how we get through our days too. And I felt so encouraged by
mm,
that lady's care,
mhm,
for my life when, I don't see her every day, but she remembered. And so it just was so touching how someone who may be forgotten in a nursing home somewhere remembered to pray for someone else, and
I love what's unexpected about
yeah.
that. I think that every one of us has this deep need to be seen and heard and known and loved. So we know that's
Yeah.
her need, especially as somebody
Mhm.
who's easily forgotten. But I love the flip
Yeah.
is that she made you feel seen and heard and known and loved. Can you imagine
Exactly.
if all of us lived with
Exactly.
that posture
Yeah.
as we
Mhm.
engage with people? That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just amazing. And it goes back to one of the books that you've written is inspired by the small things with great love. You write about this missional type of living in our everyday and those little neighbors or, the everyday people that you interact with and how we can look for opportunities, right? How can busy women integrate purpose into their current season rather than waiting for a different one? Is a question
How
from that.
long do we have? How long do we have? I get so fired up about this. And
Yeah.
whenever I was writing it, I had enough room. Like my kids had gotten old enough that they could go to school and I had room to write it. But
Mhm,
even in that season, I was friends with a mom. Boy, she might have had 4 kids under 6 years old. So I could see her life.
mhm,
She had a heart for God. She had a heart for people. And and I know that especially for women, it can feel frustrating. Like,
mhm,
and sometimes it's tempting to think that missions is over there. Or,
mhm,
if we're like social justice warriors, we can look at Dr. King and think, oh, it was way back when, or it's Mother Teresa over there. No, 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 no. I'm so convinced
mhm,
that it happens right where we live. So yes, that's our
mm,
home. It's our neighborhood. It's the carpool line. It's the soccer game. It's our
mhm,
workplaces. That's exactly where God calls us to have meaning and purpose. Oh
mhm.
boy, I'm getting real warm and fired up about this. That's good news because
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like the good news is that it
Mhm,
happens right where we live, and the Spirit kind
mhm,
of shows us, opens our eyes to the people around us, and kind of invites us to love the people whose paths we cross. Maybe we'll know their
mhm.
name, maybe it'll be that checker who bags our groceries every week, or the
Yeah.
mechanic who changes our oil, but, yeah, I'm just real convinced that neighbor love, just like the Good Samaritan. He's on his way to work. He just wants to
Mhm.
stop at Starbucks and get his coffee and bumps into
Yeah.
somebody and is just open to, yeah, loving the person right in front of him. Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah.
and that story I particularly like because
Mhm,
sometimes our modern ears miss it, but that was such an unlikely someone because the Jews and the
mhm.
Samaritans were
Yes.
not loving each other. And it's not only
Mhm,
that, right? Because if Jesus's audience were Jews, you expect the
mhm,
hero of the story. You expect the good guy
mhm.
to be a Jew. Ooh, it was a Samaritan. I'm just in huge air quotes, the bad guy, the unlikely,
Yeah.
the one in the people group we don't like. He was the hero because he just did the thing, because he loved the person in front of him. And I think
Yeah.
we're all do exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, something we forget sometimes because 'cause we're so busy,
Mhm.
and so we just have to kind of continuously remind ourselves that to reach out to just someone next door, that'll make such a huge difference in their life. And then kind of just switching gears to a little bit different topic is how do we discern the difference between ambition and calling?
Mm. That's interesting. I feel like I don't pay too much attention to, like, the ambition in my own heart. I probably should. I should probably pay attention to it. But as far as calling, as I'm talking,
Mhm,
I'm feeling like I'm hearing a few different themes, and this theme again is
mhm,
that business of saying the thing that only you can say. I feel like your calling is
mhm,
doing that thing that only you can do, because not only has
mhm,
God designed you uniquely, your insides,
mhm,
you've also had a very whoever you are, you've had a particular unique
mhm,
experience that
mhm.
nobody else in the world has had. And I feel like between
Yeah,
those two things, God's unique design and our unique experience, there is just the
yeah.
thing that we're called to is, I just feel like it's
Mhm,
tied to both of those things. It's using our gifts, it's using our experience, and we really are, it sounds so cliche to say, we're the only ones who can do it, but yeah, because we are so very unique, I think that
Mhm,
if we can be asking God about that to find our
mhm,
call, the unique way, God, that you designed me, and this unique set of experiences I have, some of them are good, some of them were hard, but all of those I feel like are what God uses to
mhm.
invite us into our particular callings. Yeah, I feel like it's true for
Yeah,
me. I know it's true for you, and it feels like that's how God works. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But what about like, because sometimes we feel this calling and then we doubt our own voice or the message that we have. It's so easy to doubt ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, right? How did you move through that in your own life?
Hmm. It's fun as my people in my family, my kids and their
Mhm,
dad and I, as we look at the way that we're kind of naturally wired and shaped and formed, I feel like for
mhm,
me, being maybe held back by fear, at least I feel like that hasn't been as much of a hindrance for me as it is like say for somebody who might have like a little bit
mhm,
more anxiety. I probably should give
mhm,
more I know I should give more thought to things I shouldn't be saying. Let's just come out and the things I just do. But I will say for those who are listening who
mhm,
do face that barrier and maybe have something
mhm,
in here that and they're hesitant to share it or to do the thing or to say the thing. Ooh,
mhm,
I just yeah, I want them to hear this the same old song is if it's in there, like you really are the nobody else can do it the way that you can do it or say it the way that you can say it. And I know that sounds
mhm,
very simplistic, but
uh-huh,
boy, I know that if you are listening to this, that there is
mhm.
something very particular that God has called you to, that you are equipped for and very able to do, and God's gently inviting you to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And it kind of makes me think of your book, Unsqueezed, because that talks a lot about, rejection and identity too, because
Mm.
it has to do with our image and, our self. And sometimes our writing, it's just an extension of ourselves, really. And so what would you tell others too? I mean, I know you just talked about it too, but do you have anything else like when tying in that whole aspect of, an extension of ourselves and that rejection or navigating that, insecurity, I suppose.
Mm.
And
And specifically for the billions of listeners who haven't read Unsqueezed, it is about beauty and body image. And the big idea is like the world is telling us, especially as women,
Mhm,
that our bodies were made to be ornamental, that we were made to be viewed. And boy, when we
mhm,
listen to God, I just feel like the good news is that God actually made our bodies to be instrumental, not just ornamental to be viewed,
mhm,
but to be instrumental. And so, yeah, that means like working and hammering and dancing and cooking and creating and doing all these things. But because I do live in a neighborhood of friend built around friends with disabilities, as I was writing that book, what I was thinking is, okay, if I'm going to say something's true about bodies, it has to be
mhm,
as true about the person who's very able bodied as the person whose uh, body is differently abled. And so, okay, God,
mhm,
what does that mean? And the message is the same that our bodies were made to be
mhm,
instrumental. And I'm thinking of a neighbor, one, two, three, four houses down, and his body, although he has lots of challenges getting this body to agree with his brain, is still the way that
mhm,
he's in relationship with others.
mhm,
And in that respect, his body is an instrument to be in relationship with
mhm,
others, no matter what sort of, other things it's doing. And it's funny, I would say that I wrote this book about beauty and body image when my kiddos were little. It was super fun. I'd say my daughter was 10 or 11 when I would go out speaking about this book and she would come with me, and I'm glad she heard it. I'm glad she heard the truth. If I wrote
uh-huh.
that book today, I have a lot of thoughts each week about menopause, and I'm not gonna stand up and show you my, what do they call it in menopause? Persistent belly fat. But
Yeah.
there is a woman at church, maybe a decade beyond me, and I love her
Mhm,
perspective so much because she warned some of us what
mhm,
was going to be coming with menopause. But she's like,
uh-huh,
you know what? I can get on the floor and crawl around with my grandkids. And just
Yeah.
hearing her say that puts so
Yeah.
much in perspective. Like
Mhm.
the belly fat means absolutely nothing, only if I'm
Yeah.
concerned about, being viewed by others, but our bodies
Mhm.
instrumental is whether it's crawling on the floor
Yeah.
or whether it's making eye
Mhm.
contact with someone, it's what allows us to be in relationship with others. And yeah, I feel
Right.
like that's the good news. That's the good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way God made
Yeah,
it.
that's true, and a lot of us are in perimenopause, and so we all feel
Uh-huh.
those symptoms, and so, but yeah, I think that example of the grandmother saying she gets to crawl around on the floor with the kids, that is ultimately the most important thing is how are we, and I think you described this earlier in how you spoke too, is how are we using our bodies as an instrument, as a whole mind, body, soul, spirit, for the purpose that God has called us to.
Mm,
It's not just for the superficial things, but
that's right.
something deeper in the connections that we have with humans, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so even I guess going back to that rejection or insecurity, maybe, we have to put aside ourselves sometimes and just let our voices be heard and see where God takes it, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it's simple as that too. I don't know.
Yes.
Doesn't always seem so simple, but and
Mhm.
then many people think there's a book in me, what actually makes a story worth turning it into a book?
Mm. Okay. I love this question so much. I'm such a publishing nerd. If anybody who's listening has publishing questions, like, please reach out to me because I will email with you about your publishing questions. But
Yes.
81% of Americans do believe they have a book in them.
Mhm.
I love that you're asking this because just within the last few weeks, I've sort of developed this filter, and it's two questions you can ask. One is about the reader, and we know that
Mhm.
people buy and read books that meet a felt need. If a book
Mhm.
doesn't do that, there is no reason that they should shell out their dollars and then spend their time reading a book. So, the
Yeah.
first question we're asking is, does this thing I have, does this meet a reader's felt need? We're asking that question about the reader. And then what we're asking about ourselves is, yep, that theme again. Am I saying the thing that only I can
Mhm.
say? So let's say, and actually books
Mhm.
about that women write about beauty and body image, there's so many. And so
Mhm.
my little ornamental instrumental angle, that was like that, right? That was the Margot frame on that. So
Mhm.
other people can write books about beauty and body image, but they're going to say something different. So
Mhm.
if somebody's saying to themselves, like, do I really have a book? Should I read this book? I want you to say about the reader, are there people who out there who have a felt need, a problem I can, offer a solution for, a felt need that I can help with? You're asking about them.
Mhm.
And then you're saying, am I able to meet that need
Mhm.
am I able to offer them something fresh from my perspective that
Mhm.
does meet? I feel like that's a good way to think about whether
Yeah.
or not you should
Mhm.
write that book that's in your heart. And you know what? Maybe it is. If those are two big
Mhm.
yeses, yes. And if it's not, boy, I still think it's valuable. Maybe the thing lands in a journal. Maybe the thing becomes an
Mhm.
article. Maybe it becomes a TED talk, right? You've got this thing
Yeah.
alive in you. And that is what you're asking. You're asking sort of,
Mhm.
how can I best faithfully steward this thing that I've been given? Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes into like, so you're serving the reader. And then how does that mindset change in the writing process? And have you seen your own mindset change as you write, thinking about the reader versus just your experience?
I love this. In 2013, took a trip to Malawi with other Christian communicators and a friend who became a friend on that trip. His name is Jonathan Merritt, and he was sort of an author coach at that time. And when he would coach authors, he would have them think of sort of an avatar for their target reader to know like exactly who the
Mhm.
person was that they were writing to. And so we're saying, what is it that that person needs? And kind of through Jonathan and some sort of awakening, I realized a thing, and I tell writers all the time, and it is this: it is not about you. So you're writing a book. It is
Mhm.
it is not about you. It is all about your reader. And I'm telling you, I can
Mhm.
say this because I've written a memoir. Even if you are writing a memoir, you're writing your
Mhm.
story, it is still not about you. So maybe on that first draft,
Mm.
you get it all out of you. You get it all onto the page, but then you comb through it
Right.
and you're choosing what it is that benefits your reader. So I would say that's just the
Mhm.
biggest mindset shift. And I wish I knew
Right.
that for the first 4 or 5 books, that I could have one person in mind, and Jonathan would call it like the woman, I don't know whether she's like gossipy Gail or spendy Susie or whatever it
Mhm.
is, but you know that person inside and out.
Mm.
And then the shift is I'm not just writing the words that I want to write, I'm writing to serve my
Mhm.
reader. That's the shift. That's the shift.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
That is a really good advice. And what role does courage play in publishing?
Mm.
Because we've talked about how it's a representation of yourself and you're just putting words out there. What does that courage play?
I would say that you do not have to gather the courage to write a 7-book series. You do not have to gather the courage to get a contract and write a
Mhm.
bestseller. All you need the courage for is to take the next step. And
Mhm.
so for some people, that might be, I've been
Mhm.
thinking about this for a while. I'm going to download the free thing on Margot's website just to learn a little more about the path to publication. That might be your next step.
Mhm.
Maybe your next step is, whew, I wrote this book. It's been sitting on my computer for a year. Maybe my next step is to find an editor or to
Mhm.
pitch a literary agent. So I just want you to
Mhm.
hear, you don't need the big, 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 big lion's amount of courage. You only need
Mhm.
the courage to take
Yeah.
whatever it is that your next
Mm.
step is going to be. So I hope that feels like good news. It's good news for me. It's good news for me. I hope it is for
Yeah. Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That is like perfect because it is just taking one step at a time and we just need that
That is it.
to move forward. Yeah. And so just wanted to quickly talk about like what are the biggest mistakes maybe aspiring authors make?
Mm. What are the big say more, give me a little more about that question. Tell me what we're thinking about with mistakes.
Well, I guess is it the imposter syndrome that we may have, or is it in just not focusing on the reader, having an idea of that,
Mhm, mhm.
or
I'm up to speed, I'm up to speed. I mentioned that
Mhm.
writers can, we can be a little nerdy about the concepts and the ideas, and in
Mhm.
my book, the number one rule of good writing is show, don't tell. And so
Mhm.
every single chapter, I want the writer to begin with a story, vignette, dialogue. We draw the reader in. And again, this is
Mhm.
so much about how our brains work because if you got a
Mhm.
big important idea or message to share, I want you to be able to share that. But if you lead with the concept, there's no
Mhm.
sticky Velcro for the reader to sort of connect that to in their own life. But if I begin
Mhm.
by telling you the story of this conversation that I had with my daughter when she was 4,
Mhm.
and um, I said to her, I said, Birdie Boo, if there was one thing I could change about you, what would it be? And there's just, her face gets all like sad and confused. And she starts listing things like
Mhm.
my eyes, my hair. I'm like, no, 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 no. There's nothing that I would change about you and who you are. And then, maybe a
Yeah.
couple weeks later, I asked her the question again. She was confused, but then she figured it out. And so whenever I would say, if there was one thing, she'd get a big smile on her face and she would just say, nothing. There's nothing you would change about who I am. I could have told you that as like a
Mm.
concept and you don't really know. But once you've got the story, then when I get to
Mm.
the big idea, you're like, oh, I call that like the
Yeah.
sticky Velcro. So it doesn't matter what you're writing about, but if you can connect with the reader first with
Mhm.
the story, the vignette, especially dialogue, let us listen in, let us
Yeah.
experience what you did. Ooh, that's the Velcro. And the I'm mixing my metaphors. The pump is primed, the Velcro is um that's
Yeah.
what I see in a lot of writers. And then once I either like challenge them, like, don't you start a chapter with an idea, like it got to be, and then they sort of, get up. But that's what I see. And again, I'm always putting
Mhm.
myself in the shoes of the reader, and I just know for sure
Mhm.
that's how our brains work. That's what's going to serve the reader is if we can
Yeah.
offer something sticky first, and then we get to the idea. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. That's awesome. And what have you, speaking of your children, what have your children taught you about storytelling, vulnerability, or joy?
Mm, mm,
And how have
mm.
you incorporated,
Okay.
teaching
I'm
them
gonna say
the same?
I'm gonna say something about storytelling and capturing the story because when my
Mhm.
daughter was it had to be between 1 and 2 because she was an early talker, and in the
Mhm.
monitor, we could hear her in her crib bossing her stuffed animals around, telling her stuffed animals what to do. And so as I'm
Yeah.
listening on the monitor, I'm a
Yeah.
chronicler. And so I would start writing down this was before
Mhm.
I had one of these to chronicle things, but I would start, writing down what
Yeah.
she said. And then when she and her brother shared a bedroom, I'd listen in and write down their stories. Sometimes it would be in the kitchen, just something really funny happened at the fridge, and I kind of write it down. And again, yeah, week
Uh-huh.
by week, month by month. And each year I would publish the thing, I'd share it with the grandparents, but
Mhm.
anybody who's got all of these ideas in them and maybe they're ideas you want to write about or they're
Mhm.
inventions that you're thinking about creating whatever it is that's or businesses you're going to start. My
Uh-huh.
challenge to you is to capture them. And I understand, like, I'm a
Mhm.
natural chronicler, so that business of writing down every cute thing
Mhm.
that's not going to be a fit for
Yeah.
most people. I understand that. But what you can do, whatever spirit is, writing,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, inventing, whatever it is, you can just
Mhm.
capture the idea that if you're listening, that is something you can do, whatever it
Mhm.
is. And if you're called to relationships, right? God, the spirit sparks that in your heart. Write that person's name down. So yeah, I would say that's the thing I learned from my kids and our family is to capture the story. I cannot tell
Mhm.
you how much fun we have reviewing those stories, laughing those stories. And I'm just gonna say I call him my husband. My husband, his partner now loves those stories about the kids as much as we do. So that's my challenge to folks who are listening is to
Mhm.
share the thing, whatever it is, it for you, for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, speaking of motherhood or in just in general, but how do women continue growing personally while also pouring into others?
Ooh, that's good. That's good. But I will say, I do not think that the two have to be exclusive. So I feel like
Mhm.
we can think about our investing in others. Boy, it could
Mhm.
be our little kids who can't change their own diapers. It could be
Mhm.
a person in our family with special needs. It could be an elderly neighbor. I
Mhm.
just think that if we think of those two things as being very consistent, that there is growth
Uh-huh.
for us in that thing. I
Mhm.
feel like that could be the win. But then I'm going to say the thing that everybody knows we have a hard time doing, and that is that it is okay for you to carve out time for yourself. I'm going to get real bold and say you deserve it. And we're not always good at that. But I'm going to tell
Mhm.
you, and I hope my friend John is going to tell you that you
Yeah.
deserve it. And if we
Yeah.
could reframe it, it's a way of being a
Mhm.
faithful steward of the gifts that God has given
Mhm.
you. And so that could be set your alarm for 30 minutes early to get up and do the thing. It could be
Mhm.
planning everything carefully so that you can get away for 2 days and do the thing, but I would encourage you to find ways to make even a little bit of space to
Mhm.
grow and invest in that thing that you know you were made for. Mhm.
Yeah. Definitely. We often forget that we are worth it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so obvious to us that our child is worth it or our elderly
Mhm.
neighbor, but we are too. We are too. Yeah, that's the real.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is something the publishing industry gets wrong about women's voices? Or do you feel there's a good representation? Or is there a
Ugh.
wrong focus? Or what is your thoughts on that?
Okay,
What are your
okay.
thoughts on that?
let me get up on my soapbox. I'm going to say, here's what we know. We know that if
Mhm,
a book is written by a man, men and women read that book. If a book is written by a woman, largely women buy and read that book. We also know
mhm.
that if a white person writes a book, that book is purchased by white people, people of color, all the people. And too often when a book is written by a person of color, the people buying and reading that book are going to be people of color. So, like, that is how it's been up until now. It may continue to be that way because human beings, because human nature. But I do know for sure that we have missed out and are missing out on important voices that need to be heard. And so I also think that each one of us can help change that. We do it with our dollars by the books that we read. We do it by the books that we recommend on social media. But again, it's sort of, a lot of people have never even thought about it until this moment. But if you're just sort of waking up to that, you can make a difference by what you do with your time and your money and your dollars to make sure that all of the important voices are heard. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I never really thought about until getting more into seeing the publishing industry and things like that. And shout out to Publishing in Color Conference by Miss Joyce, who is a huge champion for people of color and the voices and stories they have.
Please let me
She
give the
and her
tiniest
son are doing
promo.
amazing.
What Johanna's
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
publishingincolor.com is
Mhm,
it's a virtual writing conference for
mhm,
Christian writers of color, BIPOC writers. Y'all, it is
mhm,
affordable. Being virtual, it is accessible, and you get to
mhm,
connect with authors, agents, editors, publishers. It's like the biggest amazing too well kept secret in the world. If that's you, if you are a Christian communicator of color, please check it
mhm.
out because there is just so much value there for you. I'm so glad you mentioned that,
Yeah.
Shauna. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because you brought up the topic, so
Oh,
that
not that I
just
did
goes
bring it up.
alongside.
Yeah, I hear it. I hear
Yeah,
it.
because
Thank
I
you.
mean, she's doing what she sees is the issue in the publishing industry, and she's making a difference. And
And
so
I'm
it's
gonna
just
name
amazing.
that within Christian publishing, Joyce
Mhm,
Dinkins, I'm sure there were years where she was the only Black editor at a publishing house. And she retired
mhm,
a couple of years ago, and she just continues to serve writers. And
mhm.
Joyce Dinkins, she is amazing. Thank you for mentioning her. Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. And so what what does success mean to you now compared to earlier in your career?
That's good. I think early in my career, I would have assumed that it meant number of likes and followers and bestsellers and books sold and dollars made. But in this season, I have a real strong, satisfied sense that success is doing the thing that I was made to. And so the two like bestsellers to my names are just books that I've ghostwritten for other people, and they built the big platform. So I have them to thank. But books that just say Margot Starbuck on the front, there aren't any. There aren't any bestsellers. Those books are not paying the bills. But in this season, for me, two things that came to mind. One is when I get to speak to you, but also like on a stage with a microphone, and sometimes that'll be a writing conference. Sometimes it might be a spiritual retreat. Like I have such a strong sense that I'm doing the thing I was made to do. To me, that feels like success today. And as you maybe started to hear, something I'm very passionate about is that BIPOC writers would be heard. And so let's say now I am a publishing insider. And all that
Mhm,
means is I kind of know like where this on ramp is. And I kind of know like, ooh, where this door is and kind of who has the key to that door. And this is how you get in
mhm.
touch with them to open that door.
Yeah.
And so that if you would have told me 20 years ago, like, Margot, you're not going to be as excited about selling your own books as you are helping people who have so much to say, helping them navigate the path. I wouldn't have even understood what you were talking about, but I would say that success turns out to be doing the thing we were made to do, even if, 15 years ago we didn't know what it was, but sort of as we discern it, it's going to look different than we thought it did in another season. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And finally, you've worked with so many authors and ghostwritten or co-written. So what are some common things you see from other writers, like such as those ones with the large platforms? Like, do you see any common traits that they may have, mindsets or fears?
Mm. Mm. Okay. Say it to me in a different way. Say it to me in a different way. Is it just when I'm looking at authors with larger platforms? What am I seeing there?
Or any those that you've worked with, any of the authors that you've worked with?
Any of the authors that I've worked with? Oh, this is naughty. This is naughty. But I do want for writers who might just be starting or who have a smaller platform.
Mm-hmm.
If you have built a large platform, maybe you have something to say and it's going to be a really valuable book, or maybe you got a book contract because you have a lot of followers. These aren't my clients, of course. You got a lot of followers, but you may or may not have something meaningful to say. You are going to get a big book contract. And I guess I really do want to be speaking to those creatives who have a smaller platform, who don't have all the followers. I just feel like you can still do something very meaningful and missional and purposeful and powerful, even if you don't have all those followers. When you are, again, doing the thing that you are made for, you may not sell 1,000,000 copies of the thing, but you can have that satisfaction when you know you did the thing that you were made to do. So we all know in our culture, having that big platform is valued, but that really doesn't necessarily equate to necessarily doing the thing that is meaningful. I just want to name that anybody, if it is you and you have your Substack and 10 followers, or if you are speaking at your church's, Mother's Morning Out morning, that can be just as meaningful and powerful as if you had the bazillion followers. Yeah.
Yeah. That I love that, and I love that we ended on that because, that's what is so encouraging is the meaningful purpose that we all have, and as you have said over and over, how in our unique voices, we can tell something unique that makes a difference in somebody else's life.
I want to say one last thing to
Yes.
that listener who's considering whether it is like her work, or maybe it's going back to school, or it's some aspect of her motherhood. Like, I just want her to hear that no matter how big, like the hopes and the dreams and the plan is, that the only thing you have to do is to take the next step. That might be going online and finding the application for the training or the school, or it might be reading the book on parenting. Whatever it is, all you're responsible for, and you are responsible for it, is being faithful to take the next step in your own journey. And so we are cheering you on as you do that. My friend Chana and I, we're cheering you on as you just take whatever your next step is.
Definitely. And yeah, I love this conversation, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. This conversation is something that a lot of people are going to benefit from if they take the time to listen to it. And so I hope that it reaches a lot of ears. And what a meaningful conversation with Margot. One of the themes that stood out to me is that our stories don't have to be extraordinary to be impactful. So often we think our experiences are too ordinary, our struggles too common, or our voice too small to make a difference. Yet God consistently uses ordinary people, ordinary moments, and ordinary faithfulness to accomplish extraordinary things. I hope today's conversation encouraged you to embrace your story Trust the unique experiences God has given you and recognize that your voice has value. Whether you're raising children, caring for patients, serving in ministry, building a business, writing a book, or simply walking through a difficult season, your life has purpose and your story matters. God's timing often develops us before it delivers the dream. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend who needs encouragement. Your support helps us continue reaching women around the world with conversations that inspire faith, purpose, and impact. Thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of Medicine Motherhood Missions. Until next time, remember that your identity is not found in what you achieve, but in whose you are. Walk boldly in your calling, steward your gifts faithfully, and trust the author who is still writing your story. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a sense of connection in the stories we shared today. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram for updates, free downloads, and join a community of like-minded individuals passionate about making a difference through medicine, motherhood, and mission work. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, keep sparking hope, keep healing, keep nurturing, and keep making a difference. This is Johanna signing off from Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions. The medical opinions expressed on this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. Always consult a licensed healthcare provider for personal medical concerns or questions. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast host.